Apparently, video essay losers are making Silent Hill 2 something it's not. It's surprising how quickly the original Silent Hill 2 is being thrown aside, as if the game was never actually that good. In the past few weeks, the community has turned to shitting on Team Silent's generational masterpiece as a way to elevate the remake, going as far as saying the remake is the greatest survival horror game ever made. This thumbnail was taken from a post that pretty much sums it up. People are attempting to frame it like the original game was accidentally a success, all of its elements weren't intentional, the gameplay is terrible, the voice acting is bad, the sound design is subpar, the game isn't actually that deep, and people are creating fake headcanon. The subreddit is flooded with We Won posts with hundreds of comments explaining why the remake did everything better. These posts are extremely cringe. Silent Hill 2 Remake works as a AAA modern horror game like The Last of Us or the new Resident Evil remakes, but pretending that it actually is Silent Hill 2 is wild to me. Silent Hill 2 is a philosophical work of art, a once-in-a-lifetime, can't-be-replicated kind of thing. You know, the remake is its own thing, not a replacement. You can tell that Bloober wasn't attempting to try and make it better, it's just simply a new interpretation of the source material. They even play with the idea that it operates as a sequel or continuation, which to me feels like a sign of respect. Only like avant-garde film nerds have ever been able to appreciate Silent Hill 2 on its deepest levels. The amount of hyper-shallow TikTok takes I'm seeing is alarming. Where are the video essay film nerds that have been having meaningful conversations about the game for the past 20 years? People that have never even played it are being real loud because they've read some vague synopsis of the surface level story. You know, it's the same kind of people that think Downpour is better than the original PS2 trilogy. It's easier to digest and feels more like a third-person shooter. The remake is solid, but stop acting like it's an actual Team Silent game. Bloober didn't write the narrative, they didn't come up with the visual aesthetic, the music, the world building, the characters, the vibe and atmosphere. That was Team Silent on the PS2. Everything good about the remake was in the original game, the philosophical deep dive into surrealism and existentialism, all the obscure avant-garde film influence like Twin Peaks, Solaris, The Shining. The things people are pointing out to prop the remake are superficial at best. Graphical detail, modern voice acting, third-person shooter gameplay mechanics. The original was never meant to be an action game. The devs intentionally dialed back combat to make the narrative more accessible, especially for women. This has been quoted. Plenty of PS2 games have very tight and responsive gameplay. If you think Konami couldn't make it happen back then because of limitations, you're wrong. Silent Hill's lore and gameplay was reinterpreted after the first game. Silent Hill was trying to create the equivalent of an interactive student film, touching on deep and nuanced themes. Silent Hill 2 specifically was never supposed to be like Resident Evil 4. These horrible takes from casuals slamming the original show nothing more than a limited perspective. They're actually using the David Lynch influence against us. Silent Hill 2 doesn't have David Lynch influence. People are only regurgitating things they've heard from video essays. Let me tell you something. It's the people slamming the original that have actually never seen a David Lynch film. And maybe you have seen the films that influenced Silent Hill 2. Maybe you did play the original game. But did you internalize it? Did you analyze it? Can you sit down and have a meaningful conversation about it? I find most of these people claiming to be fans only really know the game as a pop culture reference. It's something they think they should like because it's been held in such high regard for so long. But if you actually try to sit down and discuss it, they have no idea why the video essay losers have been writing about it for the past 20 years. They'll go watch 30 seconds of a cutscene and come back saying, oh, she's looking for her mother, it's not that deep. I swear to God, this actually happened to me. The things people say about Silent Hill 2 in those video essays, it's all true. The game is everything we've been writing about since it released. When people compare the dialogue and line delivery to a David Lynch film, what they're referencing is Twin Peaks. Many of the characters dealing with trauma in that show have a very similar tone and vibe to Silent Hill 2. The quick shifts in emotion, the surreal glazed look in their eyes, the uncanny valley vibe when hearing them speak, the feeling that they aren't making sense or not in reality. Laura's father in the show has a very similar story to James. This stuff might come off like bad acting, but it serves a purpose. It works with the narrative. People denying this just aren't familiar. They've seen other people make the argument and assume that it's true, because it fits their shallow narrative that Silent Hill 2 had bad voice acting. How is it bad when it supports the game's themes and narrative? Again, whether it's intentional or not, great art often comes from an unintentional place, the subconscious. Bunch of devs working on the game are into Twin Peaks and David Lynch, then the game's dialogue comes off like a Twin Peaks scene. Wild. Did they sit down and say, let's make this like David Lynch? Who knows? It doesn't matter. It comes off that way and it works. The line delivery of Maria and Mary are absolutely undeniably incredible in the original game. So you think they just let Eddie and Angela have trash scenes because they couldn't do better? No. Eddie and Angela having that bizarre, uncanny valley delivery fit what they were trying to do. It was intentional. Angela's performance in the remake works for different reasons. It's a more realistic interpretation, meant to be more relatable to a modern audience. A lot of the voice acting in the remake is more like real people having real conversations. She isn't lost in this dreamlike state. She speaks clearly and with intent. This is just a different interpretation of the character. Every scene in detail is highly nuanced and creates meaning. The OG devs were incredible artists who all had different ideas and unique perspectives. Silent Hill 2 is greater than the sum of all of its parts, and that's the point and why it's so magical. It was a rare situation where a dev team was left alone to make the game they wanted to make. And all the limitations did was make it so everything they put in had to mean something. There had to be a reason it was there, because there were limitations. The remake can only exist and be as good as it is because the original was so good. People slamming the original never appreciated it in the first place. I've heard comparisons saying the remake is like John Carpenter's The Thing, an example of a remake surpassing the original. This isn't one of those cases. This is more like A Song of Ice and Fire and Game of Thrones. The books are amazing and the HBO adaptation was pretty good too. There are things the HBO show arguably did better, but it's not as good as the books. Only people who never read them thinks the show is better. And I'm a massive fan of the show, just like I'm a massive fan of the Silent Hill 2 remake. The remake has a lot of good elements. I can argue it's a 9 out of 10 or a 10 out of 10 game. And the way they reinterpreted and framed the story really works. A lot of what they did to make it as good as it is honestly goes over people's heads. Graphical detail, voice acting, the new clunky combat system, it's not it. The way I see it and what I find interesting, they're playing with the idea that James is stuck in a loop. Maria and James having vague memories of it all happening before, James leaving notes for himself, Maria's photographs scattered all over the map, James' literal body holding key items dead in dozens of different ways. It's almost like he's trying to warn or guide himself. In Maria dealing with the existentialism of her existence, it's more than just fanfare. The fact that Bloober was bold enough to make a real survival horror game, tons of backtracking, puzzle solving, resource management, hours and hours of traversing dark, desolate hallways, incredibly well-designed puzzles that are fun and challenging. The remake is a hardcore old-school survival horror game, and I promise you 90% of these OG haters are just following a walkthrough. They're missing out on the best parts of it. You know, point A to point B, oh my god, look at how scary and modern the game looks. The OG was scary too. Even to this day, walking around the apartments has a crushing, intense atmosphere with the cinematic camera and subtonal ambient music. Akira Yamaoka's score was so thoughtfully placed and created this incredible vibe. OG Silent Hill 2 has so much aura, and the remake is just the other side of the same coin. These modern remakes do end up acting as replacements, whether it's intended or not, and it's because of casual fans, passerbyers, flavor of the week, brain-rotted TikTok speds. The original games aren't easily available on modern platforms. Even if they were, people aren't going to take the time to try to see what all the hype was about. They aren't going to go emulate a PS2 game because there's a modern version that has all the gameplay elements they're used to. It's way easier to assume the original is only hyped because of nostalgia and headcanon than actually go play it for yourself and see. You know, then they go on Reddit and TikTok and feel validated in an echo chamber of other Silent Hill 2 haters. And it's only because a lot of the OG fans are just being quiet about it. If you dig deep into the development of Silent Hill 2, get familiar with the content that inspired the original team, have appreciation for art and the specific aesthetic they were going for, understand the differences between stylized art and hyper-realism, you aren't going to be slamming the original then doubling and tripling down on it. Unreal Engine is designed to emulate photorealistic art. The RE engine is the same way. PS2 graphics are more in line with surrealism. Whether intentional or not, OG Silent Hill 2 has a style that is timeless, a dreamlike quality, and abstract expressionism. The games are different styles, and the PS2 era is a snapshot in time, a product of its environment. They made what they wanted with the tools that they had, but having limitations often results in incredible art, like I said. It's really lame to frame it as, it looks bad because that's all they could do at the time. It's a shallow take on art. With that mindset, everything that isn't attempting to go for hyper-realism is bad. Silent Hill 2 has been inspiring artists since the day it released. People love its aesthetic and style. The PS2 era has its own look that will continue to inspire people. There's plenty of new young artists that see the PS2 era and think, wow, this is cool, I want to make something like this. It's not just out of touch old heads blinded by nostalgia. Hopefully I've articulated my point well enough to not be downvoted to the Shadow Realm. I have a video essay on the original Silent Hill 2 called Silent Hill 2: The Moment Video Games Became Art, go check that out. I also have a review coming on the remake, trying to play through all the new endings before I write it. If you've made it this far in the video, remember to like, comment, and subscribe. Thanks for watching.